All right, so I'm here with Rob Howard. How are we doing today, Rob?
I'm doing well, Adam. How are you doing?
Pretty good. So if you want to start by just giving us a quick background on who you are, and then jump into a background on the current company we're going to talk about today.
Sure. So my background is I'm a technology entrepreneur and kind of been doing that for the past 20 plus years. My first company I started when I was in college, way back in like the mid 90s, and I was actually one of the first students at my college that had internet access, that figured out how to connect to the school to get free internet. And so I went ahead and started a business that helped students and teachers and faculty and eventually like people around the community all get hooked up to the internet. And as a college student, I was making about $60 an hour. And then I had a team of my buddies that we were doing the same thing. And that was pretty fun. So the kind of abbreviated history is I sold that business. I went to go work for Microsoft for about 6 years. Helped worked on a technology that became what's known as .NET, which is kind of the developer technology that if you're in Microsoft kind of developer ecosystem, you're familiar with. Left there in 2004, started a company called Telligent. We were one of the first businesses that built online communities, and we did that for it's like WebMD, Microsoft, Starbucks, Apple was a customer, MySpace was a customer, Facebook was a customer. So huge success with that business. Ended up selling that in 2015 to another company, and then left in 2017 and started Daily Story, which is my current company. And that business is a marketing automation software business. And I started that because when my last company, Telligent, got acquired, the acquirer had me use this really complicated technology for marketing automation called Eloqua, and I hated it. I was like, man, if I hate this and I'm a relatively up to speed business guy, technology guy, there's got to be other technology companies that are smaller than this that are really kind of challenged with marketing and marketing automation. And I always love that space. So that's kind of what I'm doing now.
Did you have any other ideas you were thinking about before you decided on Daily Story?
Oh, I had dozens of ideas. My problem is it's never coming up with ideas. My problem is kind of staying focused on picking one thing and doing that one thing. One of the ideas I kicked around, I had kicked around the idea of starting a kind of a micro SaaS business that did web-based screenshots. So imagine you had an API you could call that could take a screenshot of any website and use that to embed it in your site. And I've got dozens of ideas. I kind of kick around like that. I started a small documentation kind of project as well. And what I tend to find is I'm really good at doing only one thing at a time. And so I decided that I need to kind of just get laser focused on the daily story business, and then just kind of ignore all the rest of that stuff. And some of those things I started pulling into daily stories, features and functions. And the problem is never ideas. The problem is always just the time and the patience to kind of work through the ideas. And you and I are both on Reddit, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of these conversations take place where whether it's the entrepreneurs subreddit or others, people are like, oh, I can't think of anything, or all the great ideas are taken. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? There's there's millions of things to do. And in fact, I'm of the belief also that, you know, just because just because you go into a market that has existing competitors, like kind of like what I did, I mean, people always think that that's a bad thing. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that going into an existing market is so much easier than going in and trying to figure out a new market, because in a new market you're having to educate customers on why they need to buy it. You have to educate them on allocating budget for it, versus an existing market, they're already spending money. They're just looking for new, better, faster, cheaper, easier, whatever it may be. So there's always opportunity out there.
Before we get too into it, do you want to give a brief synopsis of what Daily Story is?
Yeah. So Daily Story is a marketing automation platform, and really that consists of three things that we do. So we help our customers communicate with their customers. So we send emails, text messages, push notifications, a number of services that customers can use to communicate, effective with their customers. So an example would be, you abandon a shopping cart on WooCommerce or Shopify. We are one of the platforms that can send the email or the text message that says, hey, Adam, you left something in your cart. Here's a 15% off coupon. Go ahead and check out. So that's one of the things we do. The second thing that we really focus on is data. So giving our customers deep insight into their marketing data. So how it's being used, how brands are using their marketing to convert or find new customers. And the third thing that we're pretty laser focused on is the automation. And automation I've found is to be just incredibly important, because what it enables an organization to do is to take an existing business process, model it in software, allow the software to run that automation. So think of like your typical drip campaign or appointment confirmations or other kind of reminders. And the beauty of that is it runs 24/7, 365, and it doesn't require any person to kind of get involved in it that could potentially make a mistake or break something. So really those three things. So it's the end customer communication, it's the data and reporting, and then three, the automation. Those are really the core kind of pillars of what the Daily Story business is all about.
And you got this idea from your previous company after working with a lot of different marketing software and firms, and they just didn't. You thought you could do it better, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a software developer, so anytime I see something, I'm like, man, I could do this. I could make this easier. I could make this a little bit better. And so it's funny, when I first started this, I was kicking around the idea, and I wrote, like, I think at the time I was playing around with PHP. I wrote about 15 or so pages in PHP. I was like, there's like actually something here. This is something I can go do. And so I just kind of started laying down some code and see what happened.
So you mentioned it's better to pick a market that has some competitors already because it's something people are already paying for. But like, do you want to elaborate more on what your thought was on how you could set yourself apart to get some of those customers?
Yeah. So it's a good question. So I mean, let me kind of frame this up a little bit, because my experience with my first company was we were a new type of concept, online communities. No one was really doing that when we introduced it, and we had to spend a tremendous amount of time educating the market. And we were one of the first ones out there. It was a lot of fun being one of the first ones, but it was also really frustrating because a lot of organizations didn't know how to use it. They didn't know how to buy it. They didn't know, once they bought it, they didn't know how to kind of monetize it themselves. And man, it was fun. So don't get me wrong, that's a great place to be in, and it's really exciting. And as an entrepreneur, it's incredibly just challenging, and it's an awesome experience to go through. But this time with Daily Story, what I really wanted to do was go into an existing market that was already established, where I didn't have to spend all my time educating the customers and educating the buyers on what the value was and how to use it. And so whenever I evaluate kind of a market opportunity, what you'll typically find is, in any given market, there are three major competitors, three kind of the big gorillas that are kind of dominant in the market. Those tend to shift around a little bit, but in general, those are you'll find three dominant players. You'll then find a number of kind of mid-market players that are in the process of moving from kind of a startup mode into more of the enterprise mode. And what typically happens is you'll see a cycle that repeats in a lot of these industries, whether it's marketing automation, whether it's CRM, whether it's other kind of established markets, that you'll have a new entrant come in, and they'll start off, they'll be super scrappy. They'll compete based on things like price or customer service, like differentiating customer service. And then they'll start kind of gaining mass, and then one of two things will happen. They will either try to move upstream, so they'll get more expensive, creating opportunity for the next vendor to come in, or they'll get acquired. I mean, a great example of that is Pardo, who was acquired by Salesforce. They were a kind of revolutionary kind of marketing automation platform directly tied into Salesforce. They did an amazing job with their platform and product. And then Salesforce acquired them, and now it's like super expensive. So when I look at a market, I kind of came into the marketing automation space, and I just kind of said, I'm going to compete on two kind of key axes. One was going to be price. So I was going to be price competitive, so that when buyers were shopping around, we would not be excluded because we were too expensive, or excluded because we were perceived to be too cheap. The second area where we've really emphasized, and what's really, I think, been our differentiator, is customer service. So we're small enough still that we can really be super hands-on with all of our customers. So we can provide kind of one-on-one customer service for pretty much every customer that comes to the door. And that's really been, to date, our biggest differentiator, is just customer service. Being able to, when a new customer comes on, spend the time with them to understand their business, help them understand what we can do, very deliberately walk them through getting set up, getting configured, making sure they're successful, making sure that anytime they come into support, they're talking to a person, they're not talking to a robot, they're not talking to AI. And believe it or not, that's a pretty big differentiator these days. A lot of businesses are, sadly, doing everything they can to avoid the customer, putting up AI robots, putting up, outsourcing all of their customer support, hiding phone numbers from end customers. And that just, I mean, I don't know about you, but like when I'm kind of shopping for software these days, I mean, I'm looking for the businesses that have great customer service. And that becomes a pretty unique differentiator pretty quickly.
Sure. And so I read, I think it was like the about page on Daily Story, and it says, well, so now you're doing quite well, but the first year or so, it sounds like it was hard to like find traction initially.
Oh my gosh.
So do you want to just walk me through all of those experiments that you tried to figure that part out?
Yeah. I will. I'll just give you one kind of anecdotal story. The most humbling experience for me was, I was about 2 years into it, and my wife kind of was like, "Okay, we need to sit down. We need to put together a business plan." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "I'm not doing well. I need to get this figured out," because she's clearly worried. So no, look, it's a tale of two different experiences. So my first experience with my first company, it was like rocket fuel. I mean, immediately, like the day we launched, we had just tons of interest and tons of downloads and follow up and lots of activity. And so, having not started a company for about 10 years, I was a little bit naive, and I was like, "Oh, I'll go do it again. It's got to be pretty easy. I'll just, put a little code together, throw an idea out there, and I fell into the trap of build it and they will come, mistakenly, which is something I know better than." And so I think for the first 2 years, I started in 2017. So 2017 to 2019, I think I had 2 customers the entire time. It was extremely difficult, financially, to realize, wow, I've got no revenue coming in, but I'm still spending a tremendous amount of time kind of working and building. I mean, I was literally working 7 days a week. I would get up at 5:30, so I was so stressed I couldn't sleep. I'd work until 9 or 10 at night, just cranking away on the project, on the code, on the marketing. And that sounds extreme, but there were breaks in there. I'm like going out to dinner still. I'm spending time with my family. But basically what I'm saying is, every spare moment I had, I was kind of pouring into this business. We weren't going on vacations. Just everything was kind of going into the business. And, there was a point in time where I really didn't think it was going to work. And one of my favorite quotes is a quote by Jeff Bezos, who said, I might get this incorrect, but basics of it is that every overnight success takes 10 years. And I think that's a great perspective that a lot of entrepreneurs forget about, is that you really have to be patient. And in my 2 years, I'd call them the years in the wilderness, where I was kind of wandering around trying to figure out where my market fit was, right? I'm talking to agencies, I'm talking to franchises, I'm talking to old customers, and it was a struggle. And it was only in, I think, about the end of 2019, early 2020, that we really kind of found our stride. I started like really identifying the message that customers were looking for. My product was, that was part of the problem. My product really didn't get to where it needed to be until about 2019. And so that kind of made the difference there too. But those first 2 years were just brutal. And that's why I love Reddit. I'm on there all the time. I'm always in the entrepreneur forums, and I always laugh when people are like, been doing it for 3 months and it's not working. And I'm like, 3 months, nothing. You like, let's try 2 years. Let's see where you're at after 2 years and see if it's working.
Sure. Were there any like big shifts you made in the product that once you made the shifts or changes, you were like, oh, this is really starting to work? Or was it just like thousands of iterations that finally got you there?
It's I'm a solopreneur this time around.
So you're doing everything on your own?
I'm doing, I've got some people working for me now. I've got some people that do customer service. I've outsourced a little bit of development, but I still do 95% of the kind of product development and kind of customer interactions. And that's, I'm a big, I did that in my first business too. I had kind of some development partners that I worked with to get things off the ground, but I'm a really big believer in, it's important to kind of really be super close to the customer and super close to the product as you're trying to really establish the good product market fit. Because what it allows me to do is very quickly translate what I hear from the customer into the product. That happens on a scale of hours to days versus weeks to months. And that's something that, as a entrepreneur working on a software product, gives you a pretty big advantage. Because if you're competing against another service that has 1,000 employees, guess what? It takes them 10, 20, 30 times as long to do anything as it relates to quickly doing things for customers. So like, what that translates to is a customer will come to us and they'll say, hey, we like your software, works really well, it does 90% of what we need. If it could just do X, and as long as I think X is useful and beneficial to all my customers, I'm like, hey, we'll put that in. We're gonna, we'll get that in kind of the dev roadmap. We'll get that built out. We'll put that in the product. And, that gets, there's a type of customer that gets really excited about the opportunity to provide feedback, direction, and help shape a product. And then as an engineer kind of person, that's really fun for me, because I quickly get to see what customers are doing, what the problems are, and what are the things that we can solve for them, like really, really quickly.
So this podcast is specifically focused on like finding those first few customers.
Yeah.
What did you go through to get your first two customers and then the next ones? What were you trying?
Yeah. So I leaned heavily into my network. So I went into, LinkedIn. I went to previous customers I'd worked with. I went to some of my previous employers. Like I went to some of my friends at Microsoft and was kind of asking them some questions. I have a few of my customers today are customers that I've had for 15 plus years at my other business as well. And so that's kind of the most important thing, I think, is really putting yourself out there, asking questions, talking about what you're doing. I'm not super big into kind of the growth hacking concepts of just kind of spamming a bunch of people and playing the game of Like, let's send 1,000 emails to get 10 conversations to get one customer. I'm still more of the process of, I'm going to be very deliberate. I'm going to research an organization I think is a good fit for what we do. And then I'm going to go spend the time on kind of building that relationship out, whether it's through LinkedIn, whether it's through picking up the phone and calling them, whether it's even cold emailing, but cold emailing directly. The other thing that I'm a huge proponent of and big believer in is SEO. So I'd say if I'm not working on product stuff, I'm working on our website, writing content. I mean, I think we've got almost 800 plus articles now on our website. And I find that, you know, I'll give you an example. Like right before this conversation, I had a call with a prospective customer, and they said, "Hey, we looked at your website. We looked at 2 other kind of competitors in the space, and I hadn't even demoed what we did yet." And they said, "We're choosing you." And I was like, "Well, why?" And they said, "Because your website has your pricing. It's simple. It has lots of great documentation. I know I can find what I need." So I think when it comes to finding your first customers, you have to kind of slow down and focus on the things that customers are looking for, which is great content. And you have to be in the places where those customers are. So looking for Slack groups, looking for LinkedIn groups, looking for Facebook groups, getting active on social media, really just constantly communicating what you're doing, because the more you talk about it, people are paying attention. You'd be surprised how often people are looking for something new. There's a whole demographic of an audience that loves to find, and I'm part of that, loves to find new things. Like I love to learn about new products, new ideas, try new things. But unless I find them, like on Reddit or Google or LinkedIn, I never know about them. I never get that opportunity to try them.
Yeah. Did you charge your current price to those first initial customers that were like willing to take the risk to try it? Or did you just try to provide something of value first?
That's a good question. Pricing is a whole fun topic. So yes, I charge customers immediately. I'm a big believer in, there is perceived value when you're paying for something. So, you know, if you are going to be paying me for a service, there's an expectation of value that I'm going to give you, as well as that you're expecting to receive from me. And that was very important. I never kind of let any customer believe that it was just completely free and whatnot. Now, have we given discounts? Absolutely. So I've given discounts to customers based on, depending on what they're doing, who they are, what markets they're in, if they can introduce us to new customers. There's a great network effect there of asking existing customers for introductions. The one comment I'll make, though, is probably the biggest lesson I learned was going through the pricing experience. Our pricing has changed. I'd say we've gotten probably 30% less expensive today than we were when we started, which is weird to think about. When I first started, I was like, "Oh, we're gonna have a trial for 21 days, and we'll just convert people off the trial. And then we're going to charge based on all these kind of different metrics, like how many X you have, how many Y you have, how many users you have, and da 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 da." And the outcome of that was, I really quickly figured out that complex pricing is confusing for customers. So we kind of cleaned up our pricing, made it super simple, just said it's based on the number of, you know, users and active users in the system, active contacts rather, and then maybe another metric if you're sending SMS messages. So that's kind of one change we made. The second change we figured out, not nearly as quickly, was that our business did not work well with trials. So we did a free trial concept, which basically said, we'll let you use the software as much as you want for 21 days. And after 21 days, it either ends or you convert to paid customer. We abandoned that about a year and a half ago and moved to a freemium model, where we said we have a free tier, completely free, that is good enough to use. It doesn't have everything you need, but it's good enough to like really put some time into and use and get value out of. And then it's very easy to incrementally step up. So we moved away from a gold, silver, bronze pricing brackets where you'd have like, and I'm just going to throw out some numbers. Let's just say gold was 300, silver was 150, and bronze was 50. We moved away from that and went to a purely dynamic pricing model that said, if you've got 250 contacts, you're free. If you've got 300, if you move up from 250 to 300, you might be paying $10 a month. And kind of as you step up, you incrementally increase the cost. But what we found was two things. One is that free trials did not work for our particular software because you had to really kind of commit the time and the effort to get value back out of it. And 21 days just wasn't enough to do that. And the second thing we found is that the pricing tiers created artificial barriers. One customer would say, hey, I've got X customers and it costs me this much, but to go up, if I just add one more contact and I have to pay, $50 more, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's a change we made that really helped things out a lot.
Okay. I just like asking all these because I'm trying to get my first customers for the current thing I'm working on. So this is cool.
Hey, podcasts are a great way to do it. I had a podcast for a while and we kind of picked the market, and it's a great way to get your name and your brand out there.
Was your podcast like around your products niche?
So we, for a while, did a bunch of work with cannabis businesses and CBD companies, and we don't really do much anymore. So helping them with their marketing. So I started a podcast called the Cannabis Marketing Podcast. And that was just kind of sharing our experiences as marketers working in that industry. In the US, there's just a lot of like laws and regulations that if you follow, you can be successful, but if you don't follow, you can get in trouble. So we did a podcast, interviewed people, talked about it. And it was a great way to kind of raise awareness of our brand. We got a lot of customers through it. And I'll probably go back and do another podcast in the future, but right now I'm just too busy.
Yeah. I see the Zoom thing says we have 10 minutes left, but there's two more things I want to ask you.
Sure.
One is, so like you were working on this idea for a while and it took a while to get the traction you wanted. What are your thoughts on when you should give up on a project or keep going? How do you factor that in when you're like a year in?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think you before you start, you've got to always do a little bit of market research. And there's kind of two ways you can do the market research. If you've got a brand new concept that no one's ever heard of, that is unique and different and is, introducing something that people aren't necessarily looking for. And I don't have a good example of that right now, but it's just a new concept. Those are the harder businesses right now because you have to figure out a way to stand out. You have to figure out a way to evaluate what your market size is, and that can be really challenging. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, that's figuring out market sizing on those types of businesses is really difficult. Or you can cheat and you can say, I'm gonna go after an existing market, kind of like what I did. And there's all kinds of sizing information out there, market size, market, average budget per company. I mean, you can pretty quickly get an idea of what the level of interest is for the market size, and how much of it you can start going after. So you have to have that information first. Then you start making a series of decisions around, how much time, effort, and energy am I going to put into going after either creating the market or trying to grow the existing market. And growing in an existing market, I think, is easier. It just takes time and patience. And so, for us going into the marketing automation space, I knew it was going to be difficult. I underestimated by about a year about how difficult it was going to be, but just being patient and working at it and grinding at it pays off. I can't imagine having to do that and having to educate the market on, what it is we do if it was a new kind of concept. So, man, that's a really long-winded way of saying I think it's going to depend upon the individual founder. I think it's going to depend upon the market that founder is going after. And it's going to depend on how willing and how long they can work with, little to no revenue, if that's the case. How much runway do they have that they're willing to kind of spend before they just cut bait?
Well, that leads perfectly into my next segment called "What would you do if you were in my shoes?"
Yeah.
So selfishly, I'll ask. I've been working on a project for the last 2 years, running bike challenges at my dad's company.
Yeah.
And we run 1 month long cycling challenges based on all the different office locations to see who can rack up the most miles. The last challenge in September, we had 700 people at the company log a ride. So
Wow.
like there's pretty people like it a lot, but we're still doing it for free. And we're two
Yep.
years in and we've
Yep.
really struggled. They've shut down all our proposals. So what would you do in this scenario?
So, you know, it's a that's a very interesting problem because you have a captive audience, but you're not capturing revenue. Meaning you have a product that your customers seem to like and enjoy, but yet haven't figured out how to pay. You haven't figured out how to pay for it. In that case, one of the things you may consider is looking for kind of what I would call tangential revenue streams, where you're not necessarily trying to monetize the process of participation. Kind of flipping the script a little bit, I would say that the customer that you're capturing on the ride is your product, not your product that you're selling to them. And then looking at how you can monetize either the data or upsell based on how those customers are using your product. So for example, could you take those 700 people and kind of upsell or promote them to like Peloton or something, where they've indicated interest in riding? Can you translate that interest into an interest in Peloton? Can you translate that interest into upselling them on accessories for cycling, potentially even memberships at fitness clubs or cycling clubs? And instead of looking at your product as the thing you're selling, looking at the data of your customers is what you're selling, is kind of one concept or one approach that you could take.
Would you try to sell ad space on your website or do more of like an affiliate thing?
So I've done the ad space stuff before, and ads can work really well. So the what you have to do for advertising to work is, one, you have to have clear metrics around the amount of traffic. So I believe, I haven't looked at it in a while, but I believe on-site advertising still sells in chunks of like 1,000 views or 1,000 impressions. So like you could say $5 for 1,000 impressions. You've got a captive audience. So what you can do there is do niche-based advertising, not using like Google. I would actually go the other route and look at some of the proprietary ad engines that you can rent and sell your own advertisers. So, again, I'll just use Peloton just because it's top of mind, and I read my Peloton quite a bit. See if you can attract Peloton to buy ad space on your app. What they're looking for matches up really well with what you're offering. And assuming you have an audience that's coming into your app or coming to your website and viewing information, seeing what this is something that always has surprised me, but for an audience that's interested in cycling, seeing ads related to their interest is not offensive to them. In fact, many people, in fact, embrace that. Whether it's ads for cycling shoes, ads for Peloton, ads for a Cannondale or another advertiser that may be showing up there. Those all may be good fits for what you're looking for. And I got to tell you, you've got a good problem. I mean, if you've got 700 people signed up, I mean, that's so my dad used to say is a high class problem, right? I mean, you're not trying to find an audience you've got the audience and you're trying to figure out how to monetize what you have.
It's tough because we're at the point where each month-long challenge we get like 50 support messages and requests, and a lot
Yeah.
of the members are in South America, so it's Spanish, which I have a very basic level of Spanish knowledge. But yeah. But yeah, we have a minute left, so thank you so much for being willing to be one of the first episodes. This
Yeah.
was really informative. So
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
cool. All right. Talk to you later.
Sounds good. See ya.